You are listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 29th of August 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing in association with Addis. Hello and a very warm welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program, Europe is promising to rearm, but its companies are fighting over the spoils. We'll look at a Franco-German summit that's trying to solve the dispute with Monocle's foreign editor Alexis Self. After that,
you feel that scroll, you get that vibration back, and it feels like you're doing something. It's reassuring. It's telling you are in control of this piece of tech in front of you.
A look at how designers are reviving our need for physical buttons and switches even on our screens with Monocle on Design producer May Lee Evans. And finally, it is the 50th anniversary of Jaws. But Fernando Augusto Pacheco, you want to talk about all manner of shark movies.
Yes, indeed, Chris, because shark movies are a genre in itself. Let's explore it together.
That and other animal-eating genres. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Welcome to this Friday edition of The Briefing. Hope you're all enjoying. Looking forward to the weekend. And I'm joined first of all right here in our studio at Midori House by Monocle's foreign editor Alexis Self. Lex, the summer is ending here, even if we are heading into the weekend. Are you sad for that? Or are you feeling... I feel like we need to have a weather chat to start. It's been raining here.
Hey, well,
so I'm going to start there.
It wouldn't be a conversation in London without a bit of the weather, would it?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's real watershed here today. It was bucketing it down on the way into work, although I've seen a slither of blue since then, so I feel like everything's going to be all right. Everything's
going to be all right. And in terms of the magazine and what you're up to these days, Lex, tell us about that. The September issue is out at the moment, but there's, never a dull moment here at Monocle. You're already working on October, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, October, well and truly worked on at the moment. That's going to print next week. Lots of great stories in there and a new look, kind of opening section of the magazine, The Dispatch, which I've been lucky to work on a bit more in October, and that's looking great, as is the September issue, which is still on sale, and which, I think personally I'm very proud of the work that went into that.
Absolutely. So everyone can read that on newsstands today. But we wanted to talk about boosting Europe's defense because it has become a priority for the continent ever since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But it does sound a lot better in theory, Lex, doesn't it, than in practice. Today, the French President Macron, German Chancellor Merz, they're meeting in Toulon. They're trying to smooth over an argument over which country and which company should be chiefly involved in building Europe's next generation of fighter jets. How's that going?
Well, just to bring listeners up to date on this particular story, there is something called the Future Combat Air System, which is one of two European air defence programmes that are aiming to build a sixth generation stealth fighter jet to reduce European reliance on the US F-35. Now, this is the single most expensive defence project in European history, ringing in at least 100 billion euro. This particular one, the Future Combat Air System, is led by France, Germany and Spain. Now, that's a lot of loot, the most in European history when it comes to defence. And the two companies that are involved in this particular project, which is Dassault in France and Airbus in Germany and Spain, are currently embroiled in a bit of a dispute over how it should be apportioned and who should
build which parts of the planes. I mean, it's really going into excruciating detail, isn't it? Like who gets to build what?
In a way, it serves as quite a good analogy for European cooperation and the fact that, with this fighter jet, it should be greater than the sum of its parts. But as you alluded to, it kind of strikes at particularly, I think, EU issue that we've seen in the past, which is, at what point does European cooperation in the interests of the whole supersede the national interests, and the fact that these leaders who are involved in deciding the European issues and the EU issues are also having to appease and please their own electorates and their own business interests at the same time as doing what's best for the bloc. And I think you're seeing Macron and Merz in a show of unity, but probably also behind the scenes at this Franco-German meeting that doesn't usually get a lot of press, trying to hammer out a compromise.
There is this interesting question of trust, isn't there? I found it interesting that Dassault's CEO kind of raised this specifically because certain things, say, have been built in the past when it comes to the nuclear armaments that France does. They say they don't want to give that up because they don't necessarily trust anyone else to make things that have been made in France until now. Is that part of the challenge here? If you're going to sort of combine Europe's rearmament, do it across the continent, even one country doesn't necessarily trust another country in Europe.
I think that you're right in that Dassault ordinarily is competing with Airbus for contracts. So, their relationship is usually one of competition. Now, I think the hope is, and the idea is, that there's enough money in the pot for it to go around. But then, leaders are lobbying for their own national companies. And then, as I said, you get into the issue of what's better and also the fact that time is very tight on this. I think that the blunt answer is that they have to trust one another. But, a lot of the issues, particularly with the Franco-German relationship, is that you've got two very different economies and two very different financial situations at the present. The French government might well fall next week due to its budgetary problems, whereas the German government, which is a new government, so less beholden to the electorate in the short term, is a country that also, for now remains Europe's manufacturing powerhouse. It's in good credit after years of deficit-free spending, and has also exempted defence spending from its debt brake. So it's in a better position to spend. And when it comes to spending, it's going to go for its own defence companies and manufacturers over the ones that are the other side of the border.
The other side. Do you get the sense that is reflected in the leaders as well, Lex? Because if you look at Friedrich Merz, he has talked a lot and seems to be putting into practice this idea that we need a common European defence. Emmanuel Macron, I don't know, by comparison, he's always talked about a European army wanting to stand alone from the United States. But is it talking a good game, not necessarily putting that into action, because he does also want to protect French companies?
I think in this instance, it's a case of who is most threatened domestically by the forces of, Euroscepticism and, as I said, of economic pressure. I think also therein lies the great contradiction at the heart of EU economic policy. This is a monetary union that's not a fiscal union. It has different countries with different, as I said, economic situations, industrial policies and cultures. And so when it comes to a crisis, and this is very much that, the situation in Ukraine and Trump in the White House, national self-interest almost always trumps continental self-interest and the interests of the bloc. In this regard as well, add to the different political cultures and the different relationships to the EU, I think the French president has always been more beholden to the pressures of national politics when it comes to EU cooperation than the German chancellor, who governs a country that is more historically buys into EU membership and cooperation and is perhaps a bit more tentative about too much national self-interest, although, as you well know, that's changing a bit.
It can be changing. But just finally, Lex, we did want to focus on maybe some positive news on this front, because Rheinmetall, the German company, is opening Europe's largest munitions plant this week. Is that a good sign? We're getting somewhere on Europe's rearmament, even despite all of these disagreements.
Hey, look, I think on the whole things are positive. And I think, at the same time as you're seeing EU leaders, rather perhaps not embarrassingly, but, kowtowing to Trump and making a big show of sitting there and listening to the teacher lecture them. I think behind the scenes, we are seeing cooperation. We're actually seeing action being taken finally. And I think that, as you said, this Rheinmetall plant that opened on Wednesday is the sign that behind the scenes things are moving quite quickly. This is Europe's largest munitions plant that has been built and constructed in kind of lightning quick time, and it's massive. It's 30,000 square meters. It's going to be capable of producing 350,000 artillery shells a year by 2027. This is good news for Germany and for Europe. European artillery production, which was seen as a great weakness. The munition supplies were being completely emptied by support for Ukraine, and if anything were to happen, that would put Europe in a dire situation. Shell production's now 6 times greater today than it was 2 years ago, so that's real progress.
Alexa South, Monocle's foreign editor, will let you get back to the October magazine. Thanks very much for joining us on The Briefing. Now here's Tom Webb with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Thailand's Prime Minister has been removed from office for ethics violations. Paetongtarn Shinawatra says she accepts the court ruling over a leaked call in which she criticised the army and called Cambodia's former leader uncle. She's the second Thai leader ousted in just over a year. Germany is urging its citizens to leave Iran immediately. The warning follows threats of retaliation after Germany, Britain and France moved to reimpose UN sanctions over Tehran's nuclear program. Berlin says its nationals could be targeted by countermeasures. Louis Vuitton has officially launched its first ever beauty line globally. The debut collection, led by British makeup artist Pat McGrath, includes 55 lip colours, balms and eyeshadows. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
You are listening to The Briefing, and let's turn to the world of design now. For that, I am joined by Mei Lee Evans, producer of our weekly Monocle on Design podcast. Mei Lee, welcome to The Briefing.
Thank you very much for having me.
I believe this may be your first time on here.
I think for The Briefing, yes, so very excited.
So for these very specific listeners that only listen to The Briefing and to nothing else on Monocle Radio, introduce yourself for us.
Yes, so I've been producing on design for the last 5 years, so feel like I've seen the worlds of architecture, craft, graphic design, fashion, but now they do have their own program, and sort of learning about all the different ways that design impacts the world around us and our lives.
You do a fair amount of travelling for this as well, some occasional festivals, stuff like that.
I try. There are ways in which we can. I think it's important that you get outside of London in this instance, and just remind yourself there's so many different ways that you can design things that are ideas of what is normal. Depends on where you are, and so it's quite useful to sort of rejig your brain and get some fresh ideas.
Our ideas of what is normal, and also I always find it interesting how much just design touches so many different aspects of how we live.
No, that's it. Everything around us has been designed, and it's very easy to forget that, which is why I think the story that I've brought for you today might be of intrigue to listeners.
Well, exactly, because this is a perfect example of that. We're going to look at this week's episode of Monocle on Design, a particular aspect of it. It's about buttons and switches.
Yes, so this week we featured an interview with Sam Hecht of Industrial Facility. This is a London-based studio who work on all manner of product design. And he was in the studio talking with Nick about an aspect of interfaces and something called haptic or tactile feedback. So perhaps we listen to a clip from him now?
We'll start with a little clip, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
There's always been 2 pressures, should we say, on the industry when it comes to interface. And one is efficiency and optimization. So moving parts, in other words, something that has a part going up and down, inherently can be a point of weakness in a system because it can break, it can wear. Whereas screens, because there's not really any moving parts, it generally can be somewhat maintenance proof. So this optimization drive. And the other one is, of course, greater and more richer control. And screens give you that ability to essentially change the layout of what you're interfacing with very, very quickly through software. It's this tussle between efficiency and optimization and the ability to create a richer and not so much experiential, but a richer level of content that can be controlled.
That was Sam Hecht of Industrial Facility. And Mei Li, he's talking there about screens and how we've kind of optimized design. But at the same time, what's interesting and part of what he talks about as well is that people actually want some kind of touchable design element when it comes to things like switches as well.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, it's all good to want things constantly optimized and the best they can be, but it's important to recognize what we might lose in order to go down that trajectory. I mean, I think of my own oven at home. It's this wonderful, sleek, sort of glass-fronted piece of design. But in losing all the buttons, sometimes if something doesn't quite work, it feels like it's not registering your touch. It feels a bit like you're at a loss. The door won't open or the timer won't start, but there's nothing to register or acknowledge that something isn't working, which is why I think things like buttons, switches, dials, things where you have a bit of
that little impression, something.
Precisely that. But it's important to recognise, things like iPhones and trackpads exist, and they don't have buttons. We might think when we're pressing down on a trackpad that there is a button under there, but actually it's a series of sensors and motors that is sort of registering that touch and giving you the sort of impression that there is a bit of movement happening. It's a very sleek and clever piece of design. And if you think about your iPhone and when you set a timer or scroll through numbers, you get a bit of haptic feedback.
It's just created for our benefit, basically.
Exactly, because you feel that scroll, you get that vibration back, and it feels like you're doing something. It's reassuring. It's telling you are in control of this piece of tech in front of you.
We want to feel like we're in control, don't we, with design and so many other aspects of our lives. So for that matter, even when it's artificial intelligence or anything, even just the little thing of buttons, we want to know that we're in charge.
I think so. And I think also as technology develops and we keep getting all of these wonderful new innovations, we always want something that's going to feel familiar, that feels like something we've seen before. And so the ways in which haptic feedback and tactile feedback can be embedded into these newer designs means that we don't feel like we're sort of totally out on a limb if we encounter something that is very, very different to something we've seen before. So that's something that is quite important going forward.
Mei Li Evans, producer of Monocle on Design, thank you very much for joining us. This is The Briefing. Coming up on 12:18 here in London, 7:18 in Amity Island, which is not a real place, but rather a fictional location. That is based on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, the setting of Jaws. Love that we got to play a little bit more of that track than just the dum-dum. It is the 50th anniversary of Jaws, which sparked a love of shark movies for one radio regular right here in Monocle. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, senior correspondent. You join me now, and Fernando, we are going to talk about your love of shark movies, but we do have to start with Jaws. It's the 50th anniversary, and we're going to be seeing it tonight.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. I've seen it many times, but it's going to be big. It's going to be on IMAX here in London, because this is the weekend. I think in a couple of cities around the world they're celebrating that. So I think it's a very special event, Chris.
It is a very special event. I'm very excited that we can do this. I can't imagine what seeing Jaws on IMAX will be like. It wasn't made for IMAX, but nonetheless, it's going to be a pretty special experience.
And you know what? From my last viewings of Jaws, I still think actually I'm still scared of it. Of course, the visual effects, there's been a couple of changes, but I genuinely think it's one of the best films of all time. And I'm not exaggerating.
It is something that many people will say, I think. So you're not alone on that one, but you are maybe in little more of a minority when it comes to the next part we want to talk about, because you just love any shark movie, I think, that has been spawned by Jaws.
I'm part of a large minority, I would say, because there's so many of them. Chris, I'm not exaggerating. I think once every 2 weeks, I think I watch a shark movie or a rewatch.
Specifically a shark movie.
Exactly.
2 weeks.
Exactly. And I want to give you a little guide with some kind of underrated gems that I think if you are a shark movie fan, you should watch it.
May I just say for our listeners at this point that you have actually brought in some DVDs for us specifically.
Absolutely.
Bit of a show and tell.
I just wanted to show off my collection. I think we should start with Bait, which is from 2012. It's an Australian movie. And of course, the Australians are very good at shark movies. And this one is interesting because there's a different take. Look at the headline here, coming to a store near you. And I will explain. There's been a tsunami. And then people, they get trapped in a shopping mall, in a flooded supermarket inside the mall. And guess what? There are sharks.
Of course there are sharks.
You know what? It's a little bit funny, it's gory, it's clever script. It is a fantastic film, I have to add.
Is this something like different, Australia versus the US? Australia's used to sharks even more than the US is, so they just like lean into a shark movie?
They lean and they are a bit smarter sometimes with the script. I think there's a lot of interesting takes here because you can go funny. Of course, we have the Sharknado stories. You know what? Can I tell you my real opinion on Sharknadoes? It's not for me. It's a little bit too silly. I like a silly shark movie, but when it's extra silly, then it's not for me. I still like to feel that I am a little bit scared of the shark. I'm not scared of a Sharknado.
You know,
if you know what I mean, right?
Who's scared of a Sharknado? Yeah. I love that we're getting so into the weeds here that you're like criticizing individual shark movies, Fernando. Give us one more that you do like.
This one is very Hollywood-esque, of course. It is The Shallows. And you know, the thing that surprised me about this film is the acting of Blake Lively. Of course, you know, she's known for several controversies more recently, but I think she was amazing in that film. I would nominate her for Best Actress that year. Maybe I wouldn't give the Oscar to her, but I would nominate. It was a very intense. It's just her in the film on a rock, and there's a massive shark around her. The only people she interacts...
Is there a sort of shark movie gap in the Oscar nominations? Is that what you're trying to say here?
I think so.
You should look at this as a serious piece of art.
I think so. I see it as pure art. And she did interact, I think, with a girl as well that was flying nearby. And I love the saturated imagery. I think it's a really, really good film.
Fernando, you did also want to mention Jaws 2, which I do find interesting because I have to say, at the point where it came out, this was at a time where we didn't really talk about sequels. Like now, everything is a sequel. Back then, sequels never really did very well. It wasn't a thing they would try, but they didn't have the blockbuster quality of today. But you actually liked Jaws 2.
I think it's a good film, and I think it's a little bit underrated. You're very right. At the time, it was not so natural to have a sequel as we have today, which perhaps was a good thing in a way. But it did actually very well in the box office. It's just that people are looking back. Of course, Jaws is the big star here, but Jaws 2 had a similar cast from the original film. Of course, it didn't have the exact brilliance of that film, but it was still a very good film. I have to admit, the one with Michael Caine, which I think the shark kind of remembers the past, that was a bit crazy even for me. You know, I was not a big fan of the fourth installment of Jaws, but I think people should give it a chance to the second one. And remember, there was a beautiful poster as well. Sorry, that's very specific, but if you want to buy the Polish poster for Jaws 2, I mean, that's a rarity, one of the best posters of all time as well.
Again, I love how in the weeds we are getting here.
Sorry.
The Polish poster for Jaws 2, everybody. Everybody check out the Polish poster for Jaws 2. Just finally, Fernando, we wanted to broaden this out because it turns out you don't just like shark movies. I know we've also talked about Jurassic Park. You like dinosaurs. You like all manner of animals that eat humans and other, carnivores, basically.
Absolutely. I like the primal element of it. You know, that's why I don't like film sci-fi or robots, whatever. You know, I think this is what I'm really scared. Those are real animals in the world. I'm not saying, for example, a classic like Arachnophobia from 1990, which is a great film about spiders. And I saw it as a kid. And then I was very much scared of spiders ever since. Or another classic, and I will say the word classic here, Anaconda in 1996 or 1997 with J-Lo, perhaps one of her first roles. And I think this film is loved so much that there will be a new version of Anaconda coming out in the cinemas during Christmas with Jack Black instead of J-Lo.
Are you going to count this as like a Christmas movie along the lines of like Die Hard being a Christmas movie?
I would say so. That's what I want to watch during Christmas for some fun and snake eating, you know, anacondas.
Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you very much for joining us. That is all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Laura Kramer. Our researcher was Henry King, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back on Monday at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Have a good weekend, everybody, filled with sharks or whatever you want in your life. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.